Hello, welcome to the 30th day of November 2021. My name is Kurt Bell, and this is the Good Life Meditation. This is my daily recitation, remembrance, and effort to manage my personal objectives and principles. The difference is the objectives are the things I'm striving for, the way that I want to live my life, and my principles are the guideposts along the way, my rules basically to help me to do that. I do this every morning, first thing in the morning, and these are also, I usually say it out loud, usually while I'm walking the dogs, but since I've moved to my new home, I've decided to do that here in front of the camera. And it helps me to be a little more deliberate. Sometimes when I just do it alone, I'm a little rushed. But if I do it and the camera's running, I tend to do a better job. So it helps me, and maybe it'll be of benefit to anybody out there. These objectives and principles are listed and explained in my book, Going Alone, and the sequel, The Good Life. Let's do it. As for the objectives, there are 7. The first of those is to be always ready to die. To basically have my finances, my family, my relationships, and my fame, whatever it is that I want to do in life, in order, so that if I die today, I leave my family in decent shape, and my relationships are settled, and or you know what I mean. So there's no words that were left unsaid. So if I need to work something out with somebody, or to tell them, I want to tell people I love them, I've done that frequently enough and often enough that there's no or very few words left unsaid. And then my fame, whatever it is I want to leave behind, whatever shelf I want to create and leave behind is there. I really need to convert one of these shelves into that so I can point to it and say, that's my shelf. So then the number 2 is the good and effective use of time, to not waste my time in life, but to be careful to husband my time in such a way that I'm making good use of every day. Right? There's good things to do with the job, with the family, and with my art. And there's not a lot of time left over for frivolity. Although sometimes it's good to have frivolous things. Spending too much time on that just to filler or to kill time seems, and if we do that to excess, seems like a poor use of time. Number 3 is to develop and maintain good and sound life principles. That's exactly the 7 objectives and 27 principles I'm relating now. Good insofar as they help me to pursue and achieve what I constitute the good life, and sound insofar as that they are able to withstand the scrutiny of reason. Next is to cultivate good emotional reactions, to become the type of man that can weather challenges throughout the day and not get unduly upset. Is basically stoic in my demeanor as much as possible. Next is to perform good actions, just to do good things throughout the day, pick up trash, hold the door open, say please and thank you, etc. Next is to remember my true limits and my true opportunities. So what are the things that are kind of no longer possible for me anymore, or never were, and what are the things that are possible, so that I can be realistic in my the pursuit of my life endeavors. Next is is to do one thing slowly, a reminder not to multitask, but to be a deliberate person that is being careful with my time. So those are my 7 objectives. Now let's do the principles. The first of those is the principle of war. To be at war with everything that I hold true and everything that you propose is true, you being anybody. So if someone comes to me and says, X is true, if it's a mundane claim, then no big deal. But if it's something profound or something that has could potentially have a big impact, then I'm going to need to understand why you propose that claim is true. And I'd like to have you, as I like to say, show me my work. Show me your work. And I'll do the same. I hope and expect the same will be asked for from me when I do the same. Next is number 2 is the principle of reason. Reason is the tool that I use to pursue the good life. And there are 3 sub-principles: honesty, objectivity, and doubt. Put together, if we're objective and we're honest and we're skeptical, then I think we have a better chance of utilizing reason successfully to uh, distill out, to refine out from the ore of life some good objectives and principles. The next principle is the homunculus, the concept of a little man or woman that lives inside our head, our consciousness, and the reminder that that consciousness doesn't seem to have a way out, that when we die, that consciousness will die with us. There's no good evidence for, or any evidence at all, that there's anything such thing as a soul that will survive our death. It appears that once we're dead, the homunculus dies with us, that little man or woman sequestered away inside our head. The next principle is the principle of the Anchorhold. Picture a small rock sticking out of the ocean in the middle of the sea, and you're perched on that rock, and there's another rock with somebody else, and there's another rock over here, and I'm on that one. And the tide rises and falls, and the sea is calm and it churns, and the waves come and the winds blow, and the stars shine and it gets cold. It's a rough place to sit upon that rock, and you can't escape. None of us can. The Anchorhold is the place where we suffer, and the place also where we enjoy good times in life. But it's also the place where we will die, each of us, alone ultimately, even if we can spot others on their own Anchorhold, clinging to life on the slippery sides. Such a cheerful vision, huh? It may sound depressing, but it actually is sobering. If not cheerful, at least it is sobering when applied regularly and remembered. It's also helpful when others suffering to remember that we can holler across the void, but we can never really join them. The next principle is the principle of the home of good and evil. The home of good and evil is simply a reminder to me that good and evil does not seem to be out there floating around. Don't appear to be any 10 Commandments or any the concept of right and wrong written in the stars. The closest that we get is our biological mandate to procreate and make more of ourselves. So to that end, the principle of purpose has 3 sub-principles: biology, with a capital B, virtue, and mission. Biology is that aforementioned desire to make more of ourselves, to create families and children, to raise them, to enjoy grandchildren in old age, and then to die. It really brings a lot to life to do that, but don't do it until you're ready, because it's a lot of hard work and responsibility too. Virtue, because the virtuous life is a very good purpose. It's a purpose that yields great ends for all of us, even though it may not be something that the universe necessarily mandates. It certainly is a mandate for good living and for us to stick around. And then purpose is whatever, a mission is whatever mission you and I choose to make of this life. Okay, next principle is, number 6, is the atomic principle. The reminder that everything is made of bits and pieces, atoms and molecules, and that these are forever changing, and this assemblage that you and I each are now will soon pass when we die. It will change during the course of our life. Get worse, usually, and then eventually we die and it will dissolve away, burned up, rotted, whatever, and we will be gone. So we better make hay while the sun shines. The next principle is the principle of nature. Everything has some particular nature. And it's good to remember, to identify what the nature of things and people, places, etc. are, so that we aren't surprised by when they act according to their nature. Like I've noticed in this community here, it's the nature of drivers to be a little more aggressive than they were in Orange County, where we came from. So I remind myself of that before I head out and go for a drive or a ride, that I'm probably going to encounter some aggressive drivers, and to make way for them, let them carry on. After the principle of nature comes the pirate ride. The pirate ride is simply a suggestion that there is no free will, that we are, to a large extent, bound to the universe and the chain of events that occurred before we were born and that are occurring now in the course of our lives. And we have this sense that we're making decisions on our own. But I would hold that we can make any decision we want, but that the decisions that we do make are always the only decision that we would have made. It's a curious thing that that free will that makes us think we're agents, but I don't think we are. After that, and I can't prove that. That's an article of faith on my part. Hopefully, the only article of faith that you can find, and I cling to it simply because I just have this feeling, this gut feeling that it's right. That's why it's faith. The next is the principle of maturity and the sub-principles of wisdom and fortitude. We are mature when we live a little, have some successes and make some mistakes, and then remember what those are, and then have the strength, the fortitude to not make them again. Next is the principle, the social principle. We are social animals. We need one another to survive. And our best ends are social ends. So I try to remind myself to always endeavor to seek the better social ends and to be a creature of people. The next is next principle is the principle of public speaking, a reminder to myself to use few words, deliberate words, carefully chosen words, and to always speak about others as though the person that I'm talking about can hear what I'm saying. This helps me to avoid gossip. Really should make that a sin. Maybe I will. I keep saying that. The next principle is the principle of temperance, to control my consumption of all things, food, drink, work, play, whatever it is. And there are three sub-principles. Suffering, because we suffer when we deny ourselves what we want. Simplicity, because a simple life is a temperate life. And apathy, the ability to recognize what is not within our control and to let that go, to not be overly or unduly affected by those things. Gosh darn the rain! What are you going to do about it? Better to just get an umbrella. The next is the principle of the Feast of Offal, a strange sounding principle. Offal being usually the waste and byproduct of a butcher's activities, right? So it's the pile of meat, bones, hair, everything that they will either throw away or grind into sausage. I think we have a lot of offal from the course of our living, mainly our communication. A lot of waste and excess talk and words and just banter that, or even upset and anger and vulgarity that gets tossed around. The curious thing is that people tend to not just let that stuff lie. They tend to kind of consume it. If we're having a fit, people tend to draw their attention to it and consume it in. And it can have the effect of upsetting them in turn, or at least changes their equilibrium, their balance is off internally. And then they wind up doing the same thing to somebody else. When that happens, that's the feast. I try not to engage in that feast because it's a wanton feast, and it's a feast that is no good. It's all filler and no nutrients, and we tend to then upset ourselves and others in the process. So the Feast of Offal is something to be avoided. The next principle is the principle of distraction. We live our lives constantly distracting ourselves from the things and the thing or the nothing that we don't want to see. And that comes into the second principle, which is the next principle, which is the principle of agency and the great indifference. You and I and all living things are agents. Our very activity gives an appearance of some purpose and meaning in life, even if that meaning is simply to stay alive. That masks and hides the awful apparent fact that there seems to be no God, that we are alone in this universe, At this point, it doesn't even appear there's any other life that we can see so far. We are really alone in an awful, howling void, where there's no lawgiver, no life giver, no justice, overarching justice, and it's just us. And nobody wants that. So we distract ourselves with work and play, etc., all those other things, so that we don't have to see that. I would rather not distract myself from the truth. I would rather face that truth. That's why I go alone sometimes, as a reminder to face that reality. The next principle is the principle of the the best seat in the house. This is a pretty good seat, but that's not what I mean. The best seat of the house is simply a reminder to myself to not want to be anyone else, be anywhere else, or be doing anything else, but to be okay where I am, who I am, and what I'm doing. Tricky thing to do. The next principle is the path of wildness. It's a reminder to move forward in life through the tricky stuff, that because it's sometimes easy rather to just kind of settle in and close and lock the door and say I'm still thinking about it, and to spend our whole life thinking about it, rather than to say, okay, I've made a decision, I'm heading out, even if we don't have all the facts, or at least good facts to make a good decision. Sometimes it's better just to do that anyway. That's the path of wildness. You're on the path when you've made a decision to move forward in life. You're a little bit confused, scared, and upset, and excited all at the same time, and you're doing it. I like to summarize the path of wildness with a little poem. The path of wildness, it's easy to find. The course of a stream, leaves blown in the wind, a beast's track through the brush, and the direction of our first inclination. Next is the risk of avoiding risk. There are two types of risks in life, the surface level risks and the deep level risks. The surface level risks are the ones that everybody thinks about: school, education, work, a spouse, family, etc. They're difficult things, but we can pursue them, and our parents recommend those to us typically. The deeper level risks are the more challenging one. That's the challenge to live a more an actualized life, to seek after something that makes our life, gives our life meaning, our art, for lack of a better term. A lot of us spend our whole life focusing on these surface level risks and ignore the deep level risks, and end up as seniors wondering, where did the time go, and what was I going to do with my life? And here I am at the end, and now what? Damn it. Others may spend too much time on the deep level stuff and neglect the opportunity for education, family, home, etc., and get to old age having lived a very interesting and compelling life from an artistic perspective, but maybe a little bit shallow in terms of a wider scope. There's something to be said for having family, but again, don't do it unless you're really willing to take on, execute those commitments, because it's not about you then, as you know. The next principle is the principle of sin and damnation. There are 5 sins, 6 sins, 7 sins. I'm going to add one in my worldview, and those are, brace yourself, hope. Yeah, hope's a sin. Hope, credulity, overwillingness to believe. Faith, yes, faith is evidence of things unseen. Those are just not seen. Superstition, need I say more? Dogma, the assertion of truth because tradition says so. Authority, the assertion of truth because Reverend so and so, or the great granddad, or whoever, whatever or professor, what's his name, says so. That's not a good reason either. And then I'm going to add another one, which is, as I said earlier, which is gossip. So first 6 are related to believing things, basically to credulity, and then the 7th one is the sin of communication, of gossip. Damnation, Remember, it's sin and damnation. Damnation because we live a damned life when we indulge in those sins. Damned in the here and now, because there doesn't appear to be any hell to go to. Or won't I be surprised? Sin and damnation. Next is the great life adventure. One or more marquee events in our life that form the bedrock foundation of who we are, our identity in a way. Next is the great life adventure. The season of philosophy, which typically follows the great life adventure, and it is when the muse begins to whisper in our ear, and we want to record some impression of the world that was made from our perspective. After the season of philosophy comes the bullseye aim, a reminder that we often shoot for the mark and we usually miss. Next is arena and utility, the idea that the life is an arena for the execution of principles, for execution of our life, guided by our principles, which are the utilities that hang like tools on a tool belt around us. So I like to imagine that when I head out into the world, well, when I wake up every morning, I'm in an arena, and I have a chance to use all of these little things I'm talking about to help me throughout the day. And I do. Every time I'm faced with something, I ask myself, what principles will be helpful here, and what objectives what objective can I further in my good response and my good living in this circumstance. The last one is the concept that nothing is enough. Sometimes it's better to do with less. That's my good life meditation for today. Usually I finish up with a kind of a forecast like a weather forecast. Open the window. What's today going to look like in terms of challenges? Well, I'm still 2 days away from starting my new job. Today I have to go to Lior's moto ride to get some work done on the bike. So I have an appointment with him at 9:30 in Corona. So I'll hop on the bike about 8:30, I think. I will, what challenges could I have along the way? Well, again, I'll be out riding the motorcycle. I could run into aggressive drivers. The motorcycle could break down. I could also, I want to finish this book today. I'm just 10 pages away from finishing. I want to finish it before I start the new job. Well, that was one. I just heard a sound. I wonder what that was. Well, I'm not going to worry too much. The dogs don't seem to be upset. So, but it'll feel a little come through me. I could run into things that get in the way of me finishing the book. That'll frustrate me because I've set a plan for today, and that could get in the way. What was that? I just heard it again. Again, I'm going to use the dogs as my barometer. I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day. Remember, be safe, but not too safe. Take care.